You're listening to the Nature's Image Farm podcast. I'm your host, Greg Burns, and we're talking bees, homesteading, and the old-time ways. This episode is brought to you by EnduraHive wax-dipped equipment. No paint, no rot, no hassle. EnduraHive. Built to endure. Now, on to the show. Well, hey everyone, welcome back to the Nature's Image Farm podcast. It is such an honor to be here to speak with you, to spend some time with you folks. We really appreciate all your support. We've said this over and over again, that bees are the conduit to the people. And if you've checked out some of the earlier videos and you kind of know our story, there's a certain point in our history as beekeepers that really comes to mind, and it was specifically in a video. And in the video was a video called Picking Up the Pieces. It's when everything was going wrong. But there was that small, still voice that we heard, that we followed, that we obeyed, and we learned so much from that. Sometimes we're stubborn, we're hard-headed, we don't have ears to hear, and sometimes God will use the thing that we're in, the storm that we're in, to remind us of that, give us direction, and show us His love. And it reminds me that if God can use a bee box, a hive of bees, as a lighthouse, He can surely use us too. There are so many incredible folks out here in the beekeeping community that are dedicated to being their brother's keeper, dedicated to letting God's light shine through all the things that they do. And I think that's a really important aspect, not just because we're living in crazy, tumultuous times, because the truth of the matter is times have always been like that. But a lot of folks are scared or they're apprehensive. Folks are afraid to go all in. I get that. I can understand that. We all do. But what is such an incredible blessing to me is when there are those leaders in the community that are unafraid to stand up for what they believe in, who they are, and to make a difference in their community and their environment in this world that we live in. To me, it is absolutely an honor to call some of these folks friends, to get to hear about their story, hear their testimony, get to see who they are as a beekeeper, as a person, as a believer. Today, I am really, really excited to bring you a very special guest. I can't wait for you to hear his story, his testimony, and get to learn a little bit more on this beekeeper, Mr. Troy Yard. Troy, welcome to the Nature's Image Farm podcast. So glad you're here.
Hey, thanks, Greg. And I don't know about the introduction, if I can meet up all that, but I'm just a guy that God grabbed me by the ear, just like all the other guys out there that grabs him by the ear and drags them through stuff and creates them into who He wants them to be. And that's where I've come today.
Troy, that's awesome. For folks who, some folks may know you from your work and dedication with the HIVES for Heroes program. Before we get started, Troy, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and you as a beekeeper, what part of the country that you're in?
So currently I'm at Old Waverly, Texas. Some of you may not know where Old Waverly is. It's just north of Houston, about 70 miles, south of Huntsville, about 20 miles, Texas, right on the what we call East Texas. Retired here after 30 years of being in the military, in and out of the military. I signed up in 1990. That was another God moment. And I retired in 2020. And as I was retiring, I thought, well, what am I going to do when I retire? And my cousin was a beekeeper. I roasted coffee for a lot of years, and a lot of my coffee customers wanted honey with their coffee. So I was selling his honey on my coffee website. And I thought, you know what, I should probably try to figure out how to raise my own bees and have my own honey for retirement. And so I started doing some research and tripped across HIVES for Heroes. And that was, I think, December of 2020. and they hooked me up right away to a mentor in February of 21. I met my mentor for the first time, and the rest is history. I mean, he drugged me out there, and the first time I got into a box of bees, something happened. You know, it's you just can't quite put your finger on it. But I think what most importantly happened is I made a friend, you know, in the community of retirement. It was, you know, my first friend outside of the military for retirement here in this area. My family had stayed here for about 2 years while I did my final tour. I actually had to go to Syracuse, New York on my final tour. So I didn't know very many people in this area. And so instantly it connected me to somebody. And on top of that, he had another newbie that was there with him as well. And the three of us kind of became the three amigos, hanging out in his bee yard and learning about bees. That newbie introduced me to the local beekeeping community, which was Walker County Beekeepers here in Walker County, Texas. That introduced me to a bee removal team, and I jumped all in. I wanted to learn as much as I could about bees, and I traveled around with a guy by the name of Larry Fox, who's at Walker County Beekeepers. He taught me a lot about bee removals and about, you know, bee rescues is what he likes to call it. Bee rescues, rescuing the bees, saving the bees. And for about 18 months, I was working with him, you know, from spring until almost fall. Just about every other day we were out doing bee rescues. Well, while that was going on, I was learning more about Hives for Heroes as well. And to be honest with you, I was getting a little frustrated with Hives for Heroes because it seemed like I wasn't getting enough connection through them, right? You get a taste of something good, and I'll share a little bit of that in my testimony. You get a taste of something good, you want more of it. And I called Steve up, Steve Jimenez, the CEO and founder of Hives for Heroes, about 2 years into it. And I basically told him, hey, your website sucks.
Hey guys, Greg Burns here at Nature's Image Farm. Are you going to the Bee Expo 2025 in Louisville, Kentucky? We are. We're excited. Can't wait to see you there. Hey, are you interested in the best wax dip boxes on the market? Be sure to check out our booth at the Expo, but look out for our pre-sale deals at naturesimagefarm.com. No paint, no rot, no hassle, EnduraHive. Built to endure. See you there. Hi, I'm Greg Burns, founder of Nature's Image Farm and EnduraHive wax-dipped equipment. Hey, as large family beekeepers, we saw a major need to do way better in protecting our investment with our beekeeping equipment from the elements for the long haul. So I coupled our practical beekeeping experience with our wood science background to create the EnduraHive wax-dip line of beekeeping equipment. Our unique wax dip process expels water from the wood, replaces and impregnates it with our proprietary blend of microcrystalline wax, offering superior weather protection without the mess or expense of paint. Our equipment is protected from the weather inside and out, preventing box rot, fungal growth, and decomposition. That's a huge savings in both time and money. No more reworking tired, worn out boxes year after year. Our wax-dipped equipment is proudly made in the USA. So protect your investment with EnduraHive wax-dipped equipment. No paint, no rot, no hassle. EnduraHive, built to endure.
I called Steve up, Steve Jimenez, the CEO and founder of Hives for Heroes, about 2 years into it. And I basically told him, hey, your website sucks. and he goes, well, yeah, I know. I'm like, well, why don't you do something about it? You know, and he didn't know what to do about it. And he didn't know, but I had, you know, some talent in designing websites. I wasn't a professional by no means, but I had for about 10 years self-taught myself how to do web design and website stuff. And so I invited him out to my house, and he came out to my house, and we sat down, and I showed him what I could do with some websites that I had built over the last few years. And from there, he's like, well, let's give it a shot. So I built a demo and showed him what we could do, and he was kind of surprised by that. And well, that's what you see now on HIVESforHeroes.org is the website that we put together over about a year's time working together. So that got me more involved with Hives for Heroes. I started participating in their, the Heroes Hangout on Tuesdays, and then started helping Steve out with his corporate beekeeping, doing beekeeping with the Technic FMC, and then also Hewlett Packard Enterprises, and just started getting me connected with a lot of people. So that's what got me into beekeeping. And I honestly, it's all about, the bees blow me away. You know, that one worker bee travels the circumference of the earth 4 times in its lifetime to collect up 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey, and not for themselves, but for the bees that come after them. You know, and that's how we should be, is to spend our lifetime traveling the circumference of the earth to help and to provide for those that come after us, to provide a better place for them. You know, and on top of that, there's certain stages in their life, or duties, if you will. And in the military, I understand what duties are, because you start off as a private, and as you grow in your learning through the military, you take on different duties. And those bees have different duties, you know, and their first part of their life, the first thing that they learn how to do is to clean their room, you know, as most of us should do, is to clean our own room, right? Clean up their cells. And then they start to feed other bees and to nurse bees. They turn into nurse bees and helping each other out, helping take care of the queen, but also take care of the newbies that are coming out or emerging out. And then they, you know, later start to excrete wax to build comb up for the bees to come after them, to fill that comb up with honey. You know, so there's this constant life cycle of always taking care of one another. You know, they eventually become guard bees. Most of us in the military can understand that, being a guard bee, guarding their home, protecting their homeland, their hive, willing to sacrifice their lives to protect that hive. And then once they graduate to that, then they forage and bring more. You know, they spend that lifetime, that, you know, circling the circumference of the earth 4 times to collect that 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey, and then they're done. That's their life cycle, and it just blows me away that most people don't understand how important honeybees are. Not only is that important, but they're also pollinating all the fruits and vegetables that we eat, and so without them, we don't sustain, because we don't have food if they don't pollinate the fruits and vegetables. So it's just whole interconnectivity coming together in one small box. Well, multiple boxes, of course. My yard turned from 2 boxes to 20 boxes in just a couple of years. As many of us do, we continue to grow our yards out. So that's a little bit about me being a beekeeper. And I've been blessed to be able to help others learn about beekeeping. I just spent the morning this morning with a newbie, and took him out to a couple of my yards up in Huntsville, and he was blessed with the opportunity to actually do the inspections himself. And we treated for varroa mites, preparing for winter, feeding them, getting them fattened up so that come October they'll be ready for the winter to come in. So you know, it's just a blessing to be able to help other people learn about bees. But also, we also got to talk about God while we were traveling back and forth, you know, and talking about how God's working in his life, and me sharing about how God's working in my life. That's always a conversation between me and the newbies whenever I connect up with them, and you know, I share with them my faith. There's nothing to hide about my faith, and if they don't believe in God, that's okay. I'm still going to talk about him.
It's Troy. It's been an incredible honor to be able to travel the country, meet with so many beekeepers from all walks of life. And while we don't need to be, you know, we're all not in the same synced up pace as everybody else around us and every other walk, right? And some folks, that they will look at beekeeping or chickens or cows or raising a garden or everyone's going to look at everything just a little bit differently. But there is such a beauty to be able to look at all things, to be able to see God in all things all the time, good, bad. It's such an amazing opportunity to really feel the fullness of life, and to be able to see how all those things are working together. You mentioned earlier your service to the country, service to your fellow man, and when you're mentioning about the bees who are spending their entire lifetime, yeah, they have to eat, right? They have to take care of their basic nutrition for themselves so they can be in a position to do. But those bees, they literally work themselves to death, not for a big screen TV, not for a brand new car, not for a new iPhone, not for bragging rights or for a photo on the gram. They're literally, everything that they do is for others, is for their colony, and also for the colony surrounding the colony as a whole, where those bees actually, someone, one of our friends just says, "Oh, I wish I would have taken a photo of it, but I've never seen it before." They said, "I saw out here in the pasture a dead honeybee on top of Queen Anne's lace." And I said, "Man, I don't know if you know like how powerful that is, because these bees literally give it all. They lay it out on the line until the moment that they die, and many die out in the field and never get the chance to come back home. These bees are literally laying down their life for their colony, for their community. And when I say we can see God in all things, when you know the context in which all these things occur, there is such incredible beauty. And when you were mentioning that, what came to my mind is in John 15:13, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." It's such a beautiful thing, even with the honeybees. That common thread is there in so many things. And you can't help not to see that. But traveling and meeting with so many folks and asking them this question, the big burning question, Troy, that I have for you: what is it about those bugs in a box?
That's one word. It's community. Community. So for me, community is something that I think that every man and woman desires. Even those that try to hide away and stay away. There's a hidden desire in all of us to be connected to one another, some way, or shape, or form. And community's always been important in my life from the day that I came to know the Lord, which was 35 years ago. I didn't know the Lord as a child. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. I was raised in a home where there was a lot of chaos, a lot of fighting, a lot of trauma in my young childhood life. Dad alcoholic. I became an alcoholic because I wanted to be like Dad. I became an addict and an alcoholic. And then, 35 years ago, there was a guy that I worked for that had a van with a license plate on the front of it that said "one way" with a finger pointing up. And I asked him, what does that mean? What do you, one way? There's all kinds of ways. And he goes, "Oh no, brother, there's only one way." And he says, "If you want to learn about that one way, you need to come to this church." And I'm like, "I don't know." And he didn't know I was going through chaos at that time. My first wife and I were at each other's throats, and it just looked like there was a dismal end to my marriage. And I was pretty active in drug addiction at the time. And so I decided to show up at this church that he said to go at. I waited till everybody went in the church, and then I ran in there and sat in the back row because I didn't want nobody to see that I was there. I thought maybe the place was going to fall in, and I sat there, and I mean, the preacher must have been preaching at me or something, because I do remember that I said, well, God, if you do exist, I need your help, because I just I can't do this thing called life anymore. I need to save my marriage somehow. I didn't want to be like my mom and dad, divorced and all that. I just didn't want to be that. And the sermon was over. They started doing their closing stuff, so I hightailed it out of the door and got out of there before anybody could see me. And of course, got in my car and fired up a bowl on the way home. And I completely forgot about that prayer. And that was May of 1989, and it took about a month. A lot of crises happened for 30 days, a lot of chaos. I attempted to commit suicide. And then June 13th, I wound up at an outpatient treatment center, and I just broke down. And I said, I can't do this thing called life. And someone handed me a short little prayer called the Serenity Prayer, and said, hey, man, when things are bad, I just read this to myself. And that was the beginning of my journey of, okay, if you do exist, I'm going to give it a shot. I don't know. I really didn't. And so I read that prayer, and it gave me some comfort, and life didn't change immediately. But it was probably 3 months later, I found the girl that understood while I was still married to my first wife, so just, still doing silly stuff and sinful things. Married that girl 30 days after a divorce from my first wife, and she was pregnant with my son. And, and so I went to church every Sunday and Wednesday, but I really didn't fully commit myself to the ways of the Lord. And of course, I wound up in the same situation with my second wife. She had left. And that's when I was driven to my knees. And I said, I can't do this, God. I give myself to you. And I laid it all out. And that's when I confessed a lot of my sins. That's when I said, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Whatever you want me to do, you tell me. And that was 33 years ago. And from that day forward, that has always been my focus. Whatever God wants me to do, I'll do it. Praise the Lord. I wound up meeting the wife of my dreams 27 years ago. We've been together for 27 years. We've been in the military together, and life has just, gotten better as time has gone by. Now, has it been easy the whole way? Heck no. There's been all kinds of trials and tribulations. Those are the promises that we get in the New Testament, right?
Right.
But you know what? In those trials and tribulations, I can praise the Lord, and I can seek Him for comfort and go out and help other people. And it's always been, and that's because of that, the community is just kind of went with me. And that's been the most important thing for me and God, is that God continues to push me to help others no matter what. When I was in the military, I was blessed to be a human resource officer, which is an adjutant general is what the Corps is for the Army. And I was blessed to be able to take care of our nation's heroes from a paperwork background, being able to make sure they got paid, to make sure they got their awards, making sure they got recognized, always making sure that everybody else was taken care of. And then also taking care of the commander. That was my sole focus in my whole career. And you know what? When they walked in my door, they knew who I stood with, because I always had a banner behind me of a picture of Jesus. Yeah, that was always behind me in every office that I set up. Is that everyone knew that it was me and Jesus. It was me and the Lord, no matter where we went. And it's always been that focus. And so then come to retirement and finding Hives for Heroes, that was just a God-given thing, because He connected me to another community. And then for a bigger perspective, like you said, now I've met people like yourself, Craig Midget, Randy McCaffrey, Dirt Rooster, talking with Bracken this morning about his son, Nash, the 9-year-old beekeeper. I don't know if you saw that video earlier that Bruce posted. So I'm connected to all these people. I've never shook your hands, but I'm connected to you. Why? Because of the bees. Right. The bees have brought us all together, right? And our biggest concern is not just the bees, but the people, helping the people out and making sure that the people are taken care of. And I can honestly say that everybody that I've met in the bee community, there's not one of them that I've met that wouldn't be willing to give the shirt off their back to help another beekeeper. And that's what it's all about, is helping each other out.
It is so rewarding to be able to be in a position of servitude, to serve, to give, to help somebody else out along their path. And we don't do those things because we're looking or expecting rewards, but the fulfillment from just being able to be there, to help make the connection, help somebody else on their path just a little bit, to be there, to shine a little bit of light. Troy, we've all been that ship out on rough seas in the middle of the night, and we can hear the waves crashing on those big rocks on that shore. At some point, most of us, if we admit it, get humbled. And in that moment of humbling, God can do the beautiful work. And there's a lighthouse just on the edge that is showing us the harbor, showing us the rock, showing us safe passage, giving us just a little bit of peace in the middle of that storm. And that lighthouse comes in so many shapes and sizes. For us, there have been so many folks in our life that have been tremendous lighthouses as we have raised a family, built a business, grew our apiary, grown in our faith, grown as a family. Troy, for you, as you look back on all these things, on all of those midnight hours on that ship, in the storm, up against the rocks, Troy, has there been lighthouse moments in your life where you look back to this day and you say, wow, that was a tremendous lighthouse for me?
We don't have enough time to talk about those lighthouse moments. But I guess I'll share one of them with you, because it leads into another ministry that I've been real involved with. Is that part of my journey of seeking who God is and who Christ is? My family joined a Jewish Messianic congregation. Okay. And we were on the pursuit of discovering how Jesus lived. I mean, I was a youth pastor for a while, almost 30 years ago. And because right when I got saved, man, I was on fire for God, and I wanted every young person to learn about Jesus, because I did not want anyone to go through the stuff that I went through. I wanted to be able to try to prevent that from happening. And I was blessed with 3.5, 4 years of youth ministry and reaching young kids. And that's where I learned about coffee, because, kids like coffee, right? And so we had a lot of coffee times, a lot of coffee talks. I had always told them that, if you wanted to, back then it was, what would Jesus do, right?
Yep.
What would Jesus do bracelets, and everybody was wearing them, right?
Yep.
And I would always ask them, well, what would Jesus do? And I don't know, it was odd that I'd never studied thoroughly as what Jesus would do.
What would he do?
I know that he would love, right?
Yeah.
He definitely would love God with all of his heart, mind, body, and soul, and then love his neighbor as himself, right? And so that was the constant theme, but I never really knew what a Jewish man would live like. And that's what kind of drew me into this Jewish Messianic congregation. And as I was participating in that congregation, I got more and more involved in it, became part of their leadership. I actually developed their whole entire website. Again, another project that I was blessed to be a part of, and also participating with their video and audio and all that. But anyhow, in that tail end of that lifespan, or that little nugget of my life in the Jewish Messianic congregation, a young man came in to visit with his son, and he's a tall guy, missing a few teeth, kind of rough around the edges, tatted all up, right? And immediately when somebody comes into any place that I don't know their name, the first thing I do is what my grandfather taught me, was to walk up to them and shake their hand and say, hi, my name's Troy. What's your name? Right? Introduce myself, because my grandfather has told me, nobody's a stranger, Troy. All you got to do is introduce yourself. Always be welcome to anybody. And so I walked up and introduced myself to him. And then I just bust out and shared some things that I had done wrong in the last week or so. I was confessing to this guy that I didn't even know. And he started tearing up, and I started tearing up, and it was like this God moment had happened, this lighthouse moment that you're talking about, where we connected, right? And then I turned around, we started worshiping because the music was starting and whatever. And I turned back to see if he was still there. He was gone. Poof. He popped smoke. He was out of there. I'm like, all right, God, what was that about? And so I prayed on that for a while. And it was another 2 weeks before he showed up again. And when he showed up again, I immediately beelined to him, no pun intended, right straight to him. And I said, hey, man, let me get your phone number before you leave. I'd like to get together with you and have some coffee sometime. He goes, and I said, what are you doing up in Huntsville anyhow, which is north of us? And this was down in the Houston area that we were at the church. And he says, well, I'm working with veterans. And I said, really? I said, I just retired. And I said, what are you doing with veterans? He said, well, I just provide them, housing if they're having a hard time or whatever. And it's kind of a transitional house. I'm like, all right, no problem. I said, I tell you what, give me your phone number and let me come up and do a recon. I want to see what you guys are doing. So I immediately come back home, call him up on a Monday morning and say, hey, what are you doing? And he says, I'm up at the Hearts Veterans Museum, which is a amazing museum. If anybody ever makes it to Huntsville, Texas, be sure to go to the Hearts Veterans Museum. They have a replica of the Vietnam Wall out back, and they have an amazing display of all kinds of different periods of military life for all services there. Amazing place. So he was there with some guys, and they were doing some painting or whatever. And then he took me up to this place that he called Veterans and Patriots United. And it was a house just about north of there by a mile. And what that was a transitional home for veterans and patriots, anybody, but mainly veterans that were stricken with PTSD, drug addiction, and alcoholism. And he didn't know that I was almost 30 years sober through Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's how I learned about God, was through AA and so forth. And then, of course, pursued God from there. But he had no idea that I was sober, and come to find out he was only a year and a half, 2 years sober himself at the time. And so it was this lighthouse moment, this God moment that we connected. Well, fast forward to me getting connected with Hives for Heroes, learning about bees, etc. I now have 2 hives out on their property. And then I take those guys out and we learn about bees. And that photo that I sent you this morning was one of those guys that came through the house, and he happened to have been in town. And so we went and checked out the girls. So that was him checking out the girls this morning. We found about 100 pounds of honey in those boxes.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah. So that was a lighthouse moment where me and this guy, we connected, right? How do we connect? Through the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit connected us. God connected us. And then now I'm on their board. I'm very involved with the Veterans and Patriots United. I'm there every morning for the morning devotions. And then whoever wants to come with me to the bee yard, they come out with me to the bee yard. Right now, we've only just got the one guy that comes out once in a while. But, I try to share what God's, taught me through Hives for Heroes and the other mentors that I've received over the last few years with these guys as well, to try to connect them with the bees. And then we talk about God while we're working through the bees and how God created these little bees, just so that we could learn about how to take care of one another. That's amazing. Again, the common thread, the connections, everything working together for the glory of God. It is so amazing to see how all these things are connected, and to hear testimonies and stories from folks, to just have even yet a deeper appreciation of all those things. Steve, you mentioned that the program that you're working with there, and also Hives for Heroes. Can you talk to us a little bit about Hives for Heroes? A lot of folks, I think, are starting to really understand that there are programs out there for folks, for military veterans, for first responders, to help be that connection point, to be that conduit, to connect folks. Can you talk to us a little bit about Hives for Heroes? Yeah, so Hives for Heroes is a national nonprofit organization that connects veterans and first responders to a beekeeper. And what that does is that it brings purpose into their lives, learning how to take care of bees and so forth. And then we build relationships. And then also Hives for Heroes provides resources through scholarships, which is kind of amazing. I'm actually using the scholarship for the Master Beekeeper program right now. So I've started the apprentice level. I just finished the apprentice level of the Master Beekeeper program, and I'll be turning in my receipt and certificate of completion, and then I'll get refunded that $250 for taking that Master Beekeeper course from Hives for Heroes. Then, of course, the advanced course, I'll do the same. I'll pay for it, finish it, send in the information to Hives for Heroes, and then they'll repay me that amount that I've paid for that. So I basically can be a Master Beekeeper for free. All I got to do is put in money into it first, finish the course, and then turn in the receipts, and then Hives for Heroes pays me back the amount that I put into it. The other part is second-year beekeepers that are a part of our organization, Hives for Heroes. We often draw anywhere from 20 to 30 names to give out $1,000 scholarships annually. That opens up in September, where we'll send out $1,000 scholarships. But I think the most important thing about Hives for Heroes is it connects you to a network of over 7,000 people that can help one another out. No matter where you are in the world, or in this country, I should say. There's actually people in other countries that are part of our organization as well. But anywhere in the United States, as soon as you start to participate in their monthly meetups and start to participate on their Facebook group page and watch some of the videos that they've put out, you start to interact with people around the country. And so that's how I've met Greg here, is through Hives for Heroes. I've met Dirt Rooster through Hives for Heroes. Bruce, I met through Hives for Heroes because he decided to become a mentor over in Alabama. He's not a veteran, but he's got lots of years of experience in beekeeping, and so he volunteered to be a mentor for veterans. And so that's the other key part, is that you don't have to be a veteran to be a part of the program. If you've got more than 3 years of experience and you would like to mentor somebody or have a newbie come and learn from you, then please sign up at hivesforheroes.org and sign up as a mentor. We need lots of mentors right now. We're short about 3,000 mentors. So if you have experience, please sign up as a mentor, because there's a newbie probably in your area that's waiting for somebody to show them the bugs in a box. How's that for a lead?
That's perfect. I mean, I'm just in a place right now of just gratitude and appreciation, just to be able to hear your story, you share your testimony. Everything is just, it's easy for folks to get the lone wolf mindset that they're out here, trying to blaze a trail, trying to just exist, right? Just take each next breath, each step, each day. It's really easy. We've all been in that position. But as you mentioned earlier, just like the honeybees, we are a social creature. There's something beautifully rewarding about feeling that connection, feeling like you belong, feeling like we don't all have to be perfect. We can be ourselves. We can be connected. We can be a part of this greater good. Even if we don't know all the things, have it all figured out, we don't have to be perfect. We have to just show up. We have to be there, right? And every day, just try to be better. Every single day, just do a little better every single day. And you find yourself connected with a guy who's in the same spot you're in, had the same thoughts that you had, maybe had the same experiences that you've had. And you realize that we're not all so different from each other than we think. Outside of political beliefs, in which, do you like light roast or dark roast? Hey, guess what? It's still coffee. Do you like Russian bees? Do you like Italian bees? Guess what? They're bees. There is way more that connects us and actually unifies us than what is out there intentionally to separate, to divide, to destroy, to seek, kill, and destroy. And Troy, it is amazing when I see folks like you who can start to just put all those things together. I love what you brought to the table, and I really am looking forward to what you're going to be bringing to my kitchen table and coffee cup.
It's on its way. It's on its way.
Troy, talk to us about Troy, folks. I got to say, this is kind of, and hopefully Troy doesn't blush, but so I reached out to Troy, say, hey man, would you be interested in sitting down and just sharing your story, And it's like, oh yeah, da 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 da, and it's by the way, out of the blue, hey, do you like coffee? And I'm like, at first I'm almost embarrassed or offended that this guy would even have to ask. Of course I would love coffee. And he takes this coffee thing to the next level. It's not just like, hey, do you like coffee? Oh, cool. Me too. Hey, do you like Chevy trucks? Oh, cool. No, it's like, hey, do you like coffee? Okay, good. I'm sending you some. Whole bean or ground. And I said, what? And he shows me this like next level apparatus. Troy Yard he's not even, I wouldn't even say like, he's not a serious coffee guy. He's like an aficionado. He's a bean entrepreneur. He's this guy that is all in the coffee bean scene. Troy, tell us a little bit about your love for coffee.
Yeah, so like I was sharing when I was a youth pastor for the Methodist Church years ago, I learned that coffee was a good conduit for conversation. With the kids. Of course, you got to have lots of sugar to go with it back then, sugar and cream. But in that process, I wound up opening up a Christian coffee house in Clinton, Iowa, of all places. Wow. It was called The Rock, Reflections of Christ. I tried my best to make it work. I tried to make it a place where all churches could come together and worship the Lord. My wife is a musician and artist herself, and so she's written a lot of worship music over the years. And so on Monday nights, we had a praise and worship night at the Christian Coffee House where everybody was invited, and we would have worship at the coffee house. And then I would speak a few words about whatever was on my heart that night. And, if somebody wanted to know the Lord, then they came to know the Lord because we would teach them about the Lord right there at the coffee house. And so in that process, I didn't really know anything about roasting coffee, but I knew what good coffee tasted like because I had been stationed over in the Seattle area for a couple of years. And so I was influenced by, lattes and cappuccinos and espresso drinks and such. And so I found one of the best coffee roasters in that area, which was Intelligentsia out of Chicago. And they introduced me to some pretty good coffee and a way to brew coffee, because coffee can be influenced by not just the way it's roasted. It can be influenced by the way it's picked, the way it's processed. It can also be ultimately influenced by the way you brew the coffee. And Intelligentsia was so proud of their coffee, they wanted to make sure that you brewed the coffee exactly to their standard. And that's what they taught me, the purpose for brewing your coffee in a certain way, certain temperature the water needs to be, certain amount of grounds, the way the coffee is ground affects it, etc. So that was the beginning of my coffee journey, if you will. I failed horribly at the coffee house, the Christian coffee house. And, one of those moments where I had to throw in the white towel and say, Lord, if you want me to shut the doors, let me know. And he let me know the hard way. I wound up getting ran over by a business partner's truck. And a long story short, I filed bankruptcy. I was about $250,000 in the hole at that time. Yeah. And a guy counseled me and said, you have to file bankruptcy. It's the right thing to do. And so I did. And I went through that whole process. And in that process, the Lord revealed to me that I was to go back into the military again. And so that's when I went back into the military. And that's when a war was going on, by the way. And I was scared to death to tell my wife that, hey, the Lord's really pressing on my heart that I need to go back in the military because, I'm watching people getting killed, and I'm getting phone calls from buddies of mine that have been deployed a couple times already. And this was in 2003. And so I revealed it to my wife and said, hey, I really think the Lord's wanting me to go in the military again. And she looked at me and she goes, I couldn't see you doing anything else. And I was like, excuse me? Would the real Tammy please step up? I was expecting a different response, and she's like, I couldn't see you do anything else. You walk like a soldier. You talk like a soldier. It just seems like it would be the right thing for you. And I'm like, all right, well, here we go, Lord. And off I went. So while I was in the military, of course, I knew what good coffee tastes like, but I could never find good coffee. And it was rubbing me wrong for a couple of years. And then in 2008, so it was a good 5 years that I went ahead and drank bad coffee for a while. It was 2007. I take that back. It was 2007 because I got commissioned in 2007. I found real good coffee because I was on the pursuit to find it, and I found it in South Carolina. And it was a young guy who was roasting coffee in his backyard. He had used a gas grill and was roasting it in a stainless steel drum on a rotisserie in the gas grill. And I bought coffee for him for a couple of years, and then he sold his company, and the coffee went bad again. And I called him up and I said, Jason, what's going on, man? Because I knew the guy personally by then because I was one of his first customers. And he told me that he needed to get out of it because he was pursuing a law degree, and it was just taking over his time. And so I said, well, do you still have that coffee roaster? And he said, yeah, why? And I said, do you mind if I buy it from you? And he says, what are you talking about, Troy? And I said, well, if you can do it, I can do it. So the rest is history. I bought that gas grill coffee roaster from him in 2009, I think it was. And I roasted coffee in that gas grill all the way up until 2000. Let's see, I retired in 2020. So it would have been 2018 or 19, 2019, I think it was, because I was stationed in Syracuse, New York, and I took that roaster with me up, a gas grill coffee roaster. Now, mind you, got to roast it outside, right? To Syracuse, New York.
Wow.
Right. And so the first winter comes, and it's like 10 below, and there's 10 inches of snow, and I'm out there roasting coffee.
Wow.
I call my wife up, and I said, you know what? This ain't going to work. I'm going to have to find a way to roast coffee in the house. And she goes, well, it's your money.
Oh, my.
So that's what led me to find the beast that you saw. And that's an 8-pound, it's a drum roaster is what it is. And I actually put that in the second bedroom of my apartment or my house that I was living in Syracuse, New York. And I vented it out the window.
I like it.
But yeah, I've been playing with coffee for a good 10 to 15 years now, and I have a hard time drinking other people's coffee, unfortunately. So the coffee that I sent you, though, I wanted to share a little bit about that. The coffee I sent you is Finca Ana coffee. It's from Honduras. And here's another thing about connection and community. So when I was roasting coffee, I was connecting with other coffee roasters, and I connected with a coffee farm out of Honduras, and the guy had just started farming coffee, and he accidentally bought a coffee farm. All right, he's from Kansas, and he accidentally bought a coffee estate in Honduras.
What?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said when he first told me that. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, let me explain everything, Troy. He says, what happens is that my wife and I were doing ministries in Honduras. They met doing a ministry in Honduras, and they wound up getting married. And so he was in finance. And so what he would do is buy property in Honduras, and then he would go down there and teach people, financial classes and how to manage money, how to make money, and so forth to the locals. And then he would sell a hectare or two of land to these folks at price, and then figure out a program so they could pay him back the at price amount for that property so they could own their own property. It was a ministry that he had set up. Well, while he was in Kansas, someone sent him a phone message or something and said, hey, it was a huge amount of property on a mountainside in Sierra Buenas. And it's really cheap. They're trying to get rid of it. Are you interested in buying it? And he said, sure, I'll buy it. And he bought it, and he's just going to go down there and cut it up and sell it to the locals as a ministry. Well, when he went out down there to go look at the land, he found out that there was an old rundown coffee estate on the property. He didn't even drink coffee at the time. All right. Ashley Williams, Legacy Coffee Farms. You can look him up on the internet. Wow. All right. Amazing story, right? So he says, well, and he talks to the local. He says, well, what would happen if we were to put this place back into running, working? And he said, well, then that would bring jobs to the area. And so he started learning about coffee to start this coffee mill running so that he could provide jobs for the locals and to do a ministry to the locals. he since then has built a chapel there. He's built a library there for the kids. And in the process, one of the ladies in that area, her name is Anna, had walked over and met him and explained to him that they had 8 hectares of land. And I don't know how many acres that is, but she was, raising coffee. And that was how her whole family had made their living over the years. And she would have to take her coffee down to the coffee mill, which was a little farther away. And they were paying her anywhere from 1/2 cent to 1 cent per pound for her coffee. And her whole family was living in poverty.
Wow.
After harvesting all this coffee, right? It's usually 8 150-pound bags of coffee that would come from her property.
Wow.
Right. And Ashley learned how to ship his coffee that he was roasting, or that not roasting, but milling and processing, back to the United States, and had connected with all of us small coffee roasters. And we had said, sure, we'll buy your coffee from you to help with the ministry. Right. And then he brought up Anna to us. And this was, I want to say it's about 9 years ago. He brought Anna up to us, and right away, all of us stepped up and said, yeah, we'll pay high dollar for that coffee. And I think at first we started paying $5.50 a pound for her coffee. And Ashley basically was the conduit. He just passed it straight on to her. Didn't take anything from her, passed it straight on to her. And in response, she started working on the coffee mill as well. And her family started helping out in the coffee mill. They would raise their coffee, process it at the coffee mill, and then they would sell it to us for $5.50 a pound. In 2 or 3 years' time, well, the first year she sold it to us at $5.50 a pound. That was the most money that family had ever made their entire life.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Their entire life. Well, she was able to put away enough money. They had a daughter and a son. Well, they still have the daughter and son. And their daughter, I think her name was Julianne, I could be wrong, was about at high school age. And over the next couple of years, Anna and her husband was able to put away enough money to send her daughter to college. Okay. First child in all of the generations of that family to ever go to college.
Wow.
All right. And that child, that daughter went to college, got her MBA in business, came back to Honduras, and Ashley has hired her on to the coffee mill as his business manager.
Wow.
Coffee estate. So
that is cool.
So I tried my best to continue to buy Anna's coffee. And that's what I sent to you this time was Anna's coffee. Think Anna, which is Farm Anna.
Wow.
And
I'm excited. I can't wait to get that here and to get that into a cup, and I'll be sure to send you some photos of that. Troy, I know a lot of what you do is, some of these are, I'm sure, are guarded secrets, and there's proprietary ways of doing all these things. But I wondered if you could share the purpose-driven cup of coffee. Are there some do's and don'ts for the average coffee connoisseur to get the most out of their coffee if they're using just, let's say, a regular coffee pot?
If you're using just a regular coffee pot, I would start off with just 1 cup of grounds to make sure that it's a medium grind. I wouldn't go too coarse with the grind, though. And I think that's what I sent you, is a medium grind. And I would just put 1 full cup of grounds to start off. And I mean, it depends on taste. I mean, everybody wants their coffee a different way. And that's one thing as a coffee roaster. I'm not offended if you put sugar and milk in it. If that's the way you like it, that's the way you like it.
Yeah.
I always challenge everybody to try my coffee without it first, and then make assessment from there. Because a lot of times people put milk and sugar in their coffee because it's bitter. And the reason coffee is bitter is because it's old. And so the life cycle of a coffee bean, how's that? Life cycle of the coffee bean is, once it's roasted, it has 2 weeks of its lifespan, 2 weeks after it's roasted, that it degasses. That coffee bean degasses. Now, when you grind it, it speeds that process up. But if you leave it whole bean, it's about 2 weeks approximately. It'll degas. Once it stops degassing, then it starts to absorb. Okay. And so that's why when people say you want to freshen up your refrigerator, put some coffee grounds in a cup and put it in your refrigerator. because those coffee grounds will absorb the air. It'll absorb what's in the air. So if you take coffee that's older than 2 weeks and it's been ground and it's sitting out in your kitchen, and it might be an airtight lid or whatever, but as soon as you open that lid, it's going to suck up whatever's in the air. And if you've been caramelizing onions, it's going to suck up that caramelized onion. Or if you've been cooking liver or whatever else is in the air, it's going to absorb what's in the air. And then so that's what makes the coffee bitter, is what it absorbs. And then that's why we're driven to put milk and sugar in coffee, because we don't want to taste that bitterness. And so a lot of times I won't sell coffee older than 2 weeks. I'll just throw it away, or I'll put it out in the garden. I'll grind it up and put it in the garden or something. But yeah, I just, anything more than 2 weeks now. You can go beyond 2 weeks. Some people put it in the freezer to extend it. I'm not a fan of it, but whatever works for you, do it.
So you want, it's got 2 weeks to degas. What is the bean degassing?
It's the air that's in it. So when you're roasting, it's hot air.
Yeah. Right.
And it's actually the coffee bean is actually a coffee seed. Did you know that?
I did not.
Okay. So the coffee is a cherry. I wish I had a picture, but I don't. So the coffee tree, which I sent you that picture of that bee on the flower, right?
Yeah.
That flower turns into a cherry, right? Okay. And that cherry, once they pick that cherry once it's ripe, they take that cherry and they'll either put it in water to soften up the mucilage around the seed that's inside the cherry. And then that seed drops out of the cherry, and that seed is what we call a coffee bean.
What?
Yep.
Are you telling me that every single coffee bean is a singular fruit off of one plant?
Yes, sir.
Does each plant only bear one fruit?
No, they bear multiple fruits, lots of fruits in each tree. Yes. Wow. But yes, it takes a lot of trees to produce a pound of coffee.
Unbelievable. That is really cool. So you want it fresh. It's degas. It's removing the air as it roasts. You want it, ground and used, in a short time frame for ultimate freshness. You said about a cup of grounds for, a 12.
If you're using a 12 cup Mr. Coffee brewer, let's say, I usually start off with 1 full measuring cup of grounds.
Okay.
Just to try that out and see what it tastes like. And then you can go from there, either more or less. What happens with the Mr. Coffee brewer is it basically boils your water and heats that water up so that it comes out and it drips over the top of the basket. And then that water just kind of goes through the grounds and it's pulling the flavors of that coffee out and then drips down into your pot. Now, when you have a pot like that, buy yourself an air pot, because as soon as it's done brewing, don't leave it on that burner. Because if you leave it on the burner, it bakes the coffee and all the oils start to stay up on the top. And those oils are the flavors of the coffee. And so then if the oils are on the top of the coffee pot and you go to pour that coffee out, the oils stay in the pot because all that comes out is water, basically.
Oh, right. Water. Okay.
So if you take that coffee pot and put it in an air pot, so it's not boiling or it's not staying hot, and it stays in an air pot, that air pot usually keep your coffee hot for up to 4 or 5 hours if you get a good one. And then you've got fresh coffee out of the air pot.
It kind of aerates it a little bit. You get a little bit of a froth or a little bit out of there. Okay. Right. So on Mr. Coffee, so 1 cup of grinds for a 12 cup machine.
Yep.
Do you add cold water to it, or do you add hot water? Even though Mr. Coffee is going to get it hot, do you add cold water or do you add hot water?
Cold filtered water.
Okay.
Cold filtered water. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. So I've got a brewer in my shop here that brews 7.6 liters. I don't know how many gallons that is. It's a lot. In about 5 minutes.
No kidding.
Yep.
Wow. I get to meet so many cool folks. So many times you're like, man, I wish we lived closer, because I'd be at his coffee pot all the time. I mean, you just can't get. But here's the other thing. Can you imagine? At some point, our wives would be like, enough, guys. All the coffee, all the the rabbit holes, all of the conversation, let alone all the work with the bees. I mean, that would be the only thing we could ever get done. And you could argue it's the most fulfilling work to ever get done. But we could only manage to get those few things done every single day.
That's why at our house, my wife pretty much demands, she doesn't outwardly speak this, of course, that we get together at 3:30 every day for coffee and cake or kuchen. Something that we learned when we were in Germany for a few years, that we have coffee and kuchen at 3:30. So, and my son's a baker. My youngest son is a baker. So there's always treats around the house. So yeah, the other part of the shop that you didn't see is I built him a kitchen out there. So I've got a 20 by 22 shop. Half of it is the coffee roastery, and the other half of it is a kitchen or a bakery that he's always baking all kinds of cookies and cinnamon rolls and all kinds of fun stuff.
Stop it! I'm on this. I'm
the crash test dummy, of course.
You must have a lot more physical discipline than I do. I'm back on this keto thing again. It's, you know, I get a lot of mental clarity, and it gets my blood type and all the other things that, you know, we all work with as humans a little bit more straightened out. But when you say things like coffee, I'm squared away. Good. I know that's no problem. No factor. It's black, so I don't have sugar or dairy, anything to worry about necessarily with that. But when you start throwing things like cakes, you know, my mind goes all it's like, ooh, well, you know, the coffee's black, so I could have maybe one little cake here, one little cake there, and you know how that goes. One leads to, if you give a mouse a cookie, kind of a thing there.
You'll want another one.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. Troy, man, I really appreciate your testimony, you sharing your story with our audience here. For me, it's really important to be able to connect with folks and to share those stories, because a lot of folks they just feel like they're out there. They are that lone ship in the middle of a storm. They're the lone wolf out there who, you know, feels like they're not even they're failing to thrive. They cannot find the purpose. They feel like they can never catch a break. They're struggling. They don't feel like they're winning at life. They feel like everything is always at them, that everything is trying to tear them down. They feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Troy, for folks who may be listening to this message and they are that ship lost out on those stormy seas, Troy, what would you say to them?
Hey, you're not alone, man. Been there, and certainly reach out. And if you're watching this show right now, then that means you're curious about bees, and so that means that you have been connected to a group that's greater than you. And there are lots of folks out there that are willing to bring you on to the team and for you to be a part of their family. I can't express that enough, is to reach out. Because I'll tell you, early on in my beekeeping career, I got a little frustrated because nobody was reaching to me. But it's not about them reaching to me. It's about me reaching to them. And when I reached out to them, man, I'm connected to so many people now. I talked to a guy from Utah this morning. I talked to a guy from Delaware yesterday. You know, and it doesn't end. And my wife knows now that if I'm getting a text, it's probably from somebody that needs to chat for a little bit. Yeah. And so we are able to work together as a family unit, and also then to be able to carry that family unit out to the bee community, and then also to, for me, the veterans community. And then we also have a church family that we also extend ourselves out to in a lot of different ways. So for those that are out there, I'll just share this. You know, when you're faced with that self-imposed crisis and you're stricken and down and out and falling to your knees, not knowing what to do and don't know whether God exists or not, reach out, give him a shot. Because I'm telling you what, you get a taste of him, you'll never want to go back. I'll tell you, this guy here, I got a taste of God, and he drew me into his world, his kingdom, whatever you want to call it. And I've never wanted to turn back to all that chaos ever again. Was it easy along the way? Heck no. He drugged me through all kinds of stuff. But you know what? He was there every time, and he kept fulfilling me and connecting me with more people to shape and mold me into who he wanted me to be rather than who I wanted to be. And I'll tell you, I would not be sitting here today if it wasn't for that one short prayer where I said, God, if you do exist, I need your help. And he took me serious. and he can take you serious as well. All you got to do is say, God, I don't know if you exist, but I need your help. And then go out there and find out where it's at, because he'll find you for it.
Troy, that's awesome. I think a lot of folks, they feel like life is nothing but stormy seas. And what I want to encourage folks is that, you know, God never promised that there wouldn't be stormy seas, but he did promise he'd be right there with us the entire time. And when you know that peace and you know that comfort, you know, you don't have to know all the answers, but you can easily, right there where you are, know who, the one who does. And that's
Amen.
an important thing. One thing I want to share with folks is we talk a lot about, you know, being a lighthouse and being a lighthouse to others. And this is one of the most important things that I think that we can do, whether when we look back and we see the honeybee who's giving her all for that next generation, for that hive, for that community of hives, living every day, not for themselves, but for others. We can do the same thing too. There's so much we can learn about us, how we can do better through the lens of a beekeeper, through the lens of seeing the bees living in that harmonious nature that God intended, that God created. And I want to remind you of this, Matthew 5:14 through 16. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light shine so before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. It's not about us. It's about shining that light and giving the praise and the glory to God. Troy, I want to thank you so much for what you're doing for the community, for the veteran community, for your church body, for folks near and far. We really appreciate everything that you do, and just thank you for just being you. On that note, folks, as always, we want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.